All right, welcome to the next edition of Non-Consensus Investing. The very special guest, the very special topic. His name is Danny Goler, and he's going to share his thesis on the code of reality. So it's going to be an unusual podcast. You know, most of my podcasts are on investment themes. This podcast is really going back to like philosophy and metaphysics and what is there really and why are we here. I was introduced to Danny via a mutual friend and client, Kevin, who actually was on this podcast about a year ago for our Thanksgiving show. And, Danny's really interesting because he has tried really novel experiments with psychedelics, and he's going to share those experiences with us. This is for entertainment purposes. You should seek medical advice. You should talk to your doctor. Disclaimer. I personally have never done LSD. I haven't had these experiences, but I'm incredibly intellectually curious about them. I think if you're interested in understanding what reality is and truth is, you got to talk to people that have had some novel experiences and can share and report back, and maybe we can learn from them. There are people like Mike Tyson that have gone on the Joe Rogan show, and they've done like 5-MeO, DMT, and the frog medicine. When you listen to these experiences, your eyes kind of peel back in your head, and you're like, what is going on? I do think there's a lot more to reality than people think. I think dreams are evidence of that. But with that said, Danny, why don't you introduce yourself?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Ram. I appreciate the invite. And yeah, I guess we can look at this, framing it in the theme of your podcast. We can look at it as investing in our own future through a deeper understanding of the world. My name is Danny Goler, and I've kind of came to become known as the guy who claims that he discovered that there's a way to see some kind of a self-executing code if you combine DMT and diffracted lasers. And I guess it's also, we were just laughing the other day with one of the physicists that works with us now, why the news spread like wildfire in such a way. I said, it's really funny because it's very memeable. DMT lasers. It's very easy to spread it out as a meme.
Very memeable.
Very memeable. And by the way, I don't believe in coincidences. I think it's kind of, it's an interesting, shiny. And I think that's kind of like how it gets your attention. But the truth is that this is just stating that is just obviously just the beginning of the conversation, because there's so much there. And the short version of my story is that I was always interested in the big questions. I was on a semi-trajectory to become a scientist when I was way younger. That was my grandfather was a physicist. That's what I always wanted to do. And I started kind of like on my trajectory towards physics pretty early on. I was 12, and I entered this special program where you kind of do, in addition to school, you also do some classes in your university. And then by the time you graduate high school, you already have your bachelor's. It's kind of like this accelerated program. And then it took different turns in life. I was a pretty wild kid. I had a lot of interesting choices that I made in life. And I kind of, and exited that route. But the interest in science and in scientific thinking and just really the wonder about what the world really is never left me. And I think to a large degree, I can't know because I'm not in other people's minds, but my sense is, especially because, this is kind of like some of the characters that people draw when they see the experiment, and we'll talk about the experiment in a moment. My experience from talking to a lot of people at this point, I think this wonder is with all of us. Is just it's either beaten out of us, or it just becomes so non-pragmatic that why even bother? Aside from maybe a conversation here and there about something that happened in science, most people don't really partake in these kind of questions anymore as they grow older. But right. And then I also happen to have been a person who really enjoyed psychedelics in my life. They helped me quite a bit in many ways. And I started noticing things in the psychedelic space, as many people have, that seemed to be difficult to explain in terms of, oh, this is just a hallucination. Like they didn't really feel like hallucinations. And of course, that's not saying much because you can be convinced of a lot of things if you're partaking in certain substances. But I've done them long enough to realize build some kind of a map between the different domains. And then one day, I've had an experience that was so outside of the regular map that I was familiar with, and it was as real as you are sitting in front of me right now. Now, I understand that you are a virtual projection, ironically, on the screen right now, but with everything that I understand about the world, I know you're a real person. So is there a chance that this is some kind of a plot and somebody made me believe that you invited me to a podcast, but this is actually AI? Yeah, that possibility exists, but it's so minuscule that it's not worth considering as serious, at least in this situation. Because why would they do that? The reason I'm saying this is because there's a lot of parameters happening in our thinking that are always in the background, and they hold a lot of water in terms of what we believe about the world. So the fact that I know that you're really who you said you are, and and you invited me to this podcast, all of these things, they're happening in the background. There's a lot of base assumptions we're making to assume this, and that level of conviction, as much as I'm convinced that you're really who you are and you invited me to this podcast, was present in that experience where a being appeared in front of me just like a person, straight up like a person, but it looked like a weird frog lizard person, but it that being was so tangible, like this mic is for me. So at that point, even though I was very experienced with these things, I said, okay, hold on. Either this is a schizophrenic outbreak, which is possible,
A hallucination, or
but
yeah.
this was way beyond what was possible in my mind. So that day I said, okay, first of all, I am not buying that this was in my head, and plus that being kind of showed me how to do something on the guitar that I didn't know how to do. It was like showed me how to
You
strum
learned
the
something
guitar. Yeah, I
from.
did something exactly. And so he wasn't speaking, but he basically said, you don't know how to do this. I'm giving you real information. I, I'm real.
How is that transmitted to you if not via speaking?
Oh, he basically, the whole room vignetted towards the guitar, almost like the whole room was like, pay attention to the guitar. And then I went to the guitar and he just kind of disappeared and appeared right next to me. And then he put his frog fingers like this he's like, do this. And I kind of followed as much as I could because the attention span was a little
Right.
out of whack. But I was like trying to do it, and I'm not a musician. I just had a guitar because I'm like practicing. So at first I thought, oh, he just wants to talk through like music theory, and I'm like, look, I will not understand anything you're gonna say. He's like, just and I followed what he was doing, and all of a sudden it was a chord, like it made sense. And then he's like, okay, now obviously he wasn't saying the okay now, but like he's like, and then I do the next thing, and all of a sudden it makes sense. So it's like there's a progression that makes sense. And I think I did like 3 or 4 chords because it was very difficult for me to follow, but they made sense in this way. And people always ask me, "Do you remember the chords?" I'm like, "I don't. I'm not a musician. It's not. It doesn't store itself in the brain in that way." But it was so jarring that at that moment I realized nothing will ever be the same. And I
When was
also
that
decided
experience? When was that roughly?
that was like 6 or 7 years ago. I want to say maybe a little more, maybe 8.
Okay.
And then at that moment, I decided, okay, well, here's the thing. If this thing is real, so like if this really happened in the way that it did, in the way that it appeared to me, then there must be answers beyond just somebody saying something, right? There has to be, if something is real and information is flowing from that thing to whatever else is real, then there has to be a way to discern that. So the scientific method is that you always study the seen to understand things about the unseen. That's how science works in general. And I was like, okay, well then how do we ask this question seriously? Like, what must be true about that space if it is in fact real? And I started working from first principles. I said, okay, well, I know light is involved because I can see it with my eyes. If it's real, even if it's not always visible to us, then it has its own logic. It has its own some laws of physics by which it's operating, right? Otherwise, it's just like a soup of nonsense. It has some geometry, must have, even if it's more than 3-dimensional. It must have some topology. It has to have some boundary, because sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. So I started making all of these assumptions, and I asked, from all my assumptions, what are the things I know for sure? So, for example, the fact that light is involved in some form, I knew for sure because I can see it, and my eyes pick up light, right? So
Right.
I started working from these assumptions, and then it took years because I was trying all kinds of things. I was, trying to ask them, so to speak, like, okay, can you show me something? Like, how do I build a spaceship? Something I can show people that, that are
Some
not
evidence
there.
you can bring
Some
back.
evidence,
That's
exactly.
what people.
And it's not very forthcoming. I don't know if it's because they can't tell you or because it's just not a thing that can be done in the way that we think of it. But there was not really anything that was very usable, like useful. So then eventually I said, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of think about this, and I'm going to keep following the thread whenever it appears. I didn't let it consume my life. I just kind of, moved on with whatever I had to do. I did it way more often. Actually, for a year plus period, I was basically like doing it every single day, but it never really interrupted the natural flow of my life. I just kept doing everything the same. And then eventually, I'm condensing an almost decade long story into like a few moments. So this is why we're kind of jumping a lot. But I eventually I landed on this idea. Oh, what started happening is that, and I don't necessarily want to enter this because every time I mention this, people, it just kind of, it's not as interesting as it sounds, because I started experiencing a lot of synchronicities. But one thing I understood very quickly about synchronicities when I started expressing it to people is that people don't care, because if you're not there and you're not really in that moment and the thing happened exactly that way for you, it's not as impactful. So just take my word that just interesting hints started appearing for me in regular life without even not involving substances or
So
anything.
synchronicity is a term Carl Jung introduced, and people call them now like coincidences. But synchronicities are essentially kind of uncanny coincidences that have meaning.
Yes, that's a really good way of describing it. So that's how Carl Jung defined it. Would you say? Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, but whenever I express them, people are like, like, because it's not as impactful. You're not
Right.
there, right?
Right.
But I
Right.
recorded all of them, and in fact, one of them was actually outstanding. But when I showed it to a friend of mine, who's a good friend of mine, by the way, he gave me a look that I really did not enjoy. He didn't say anything. He didn't, like, he looked at me like I was genuinely crazy. So I never spoke about it again, because I was like, I did not like how that felt. Like when somebody looks at you like that. Um, so I never spoke about it again. I said, unless I figure something out, I'm never going to talk about this. I'm just going
Well, it
to
takes
do
courage
my
to talk
thing.
about anything like this.
The what?
Absolutely.
The what?
It
The
takes
what?
courage to talk about anything like this.
I appreciate the kind words. I'm not sure it required courage for me, because for me it's just kind of
Sure,
like,
sure,
hey,
sure.
I know where I stand in my head.
Yeah.
I know, like, myself well enough to know that if I'm saying something with enough confidence, I
Yeah.
arrived there after a lot of paying attention. It wasn't just like a happenstance. So, anyways, I didn't talk about it again for years. And then eventually I landed on this idea, which is what the movie we finishing with our documentary called The Discovery, by the director Aaron Vanden. He's an absolute master of his craft. It's going to be coming out hopefully by April or June. Very excited about this. And the first trailer Aaron made, which he did in like 3 days, that's what everybody knows is kind of like this viral trailer that was going around everywhere. And the movie will depict the exact process of like exactly what happened, how I got to the idea. Eventually, I landed on this idea that somehow lasers, specifically if they're diffracted, which just means that they have a diffracted lens on top, so it just kind of spreads the light, basically, just like the ones that people use to scan barcodes in the supermarket. If you use that and you project it on the wall, there you go. Uh, and you happen to be on DMT, and now we know it works with all tryptamines, so mushrooms. Somebody said that it worked for them with acid. I can't concur because I haven't tried it. We know it works with ayahuasca. I had a shaman in Central America do a ceremony and put the laser at the ceiling and put everybody in a circle, and everybody saw the code. And we even learned that it works with 5-MeO DMT, which for people who are not familiar with these things, I'm just speaking gibberish right now, and we'll get through this. But basically, the punchline is that it works on a lot of different substances. It's always the same thing, which is surprising because a lot of these things do express themselves phenomenologically different. So they're not all appear to you the same internally, but yet the code is always the same. And it appears the same for basically all people, just by obviously talking and asking each other whether we are saying the same thing currently. And it doesn't really change no matter where you are, who you are, what you do, play sound, don't play sound, play frequencies. We threw every single thing we could think of at it, including some people that are known to have pretty good, like ability to kind of work with energy and things like this. And even they were very convinced that they would be able to influence it. They were very
let me
surprised.
it back. So you have a diffraction laser, like a laser pen that diffracts laser.
Mm-hmm.
Really get that on Amazon.com. That's
Exactly.
2. Then you have people that have taken a psychedelic, one of several different kinds of psychedelics, and the phenomena that they see are essentially like these characters. Some of them look like kanji characters from the Japanese language. Some look like hieroglyphics. Some I can't map to anything that I've seen before, but they are symbols. And now when people blink, what happens? Do like different characters appear, or are they the same characters?
No, it's as solid. This is what's so surprising about it. So first of all, I'm always trying to be very sensitive to what it must be like to be on the receiving end of what I'm saying, especially if you've never done psychedelics or never will, right? So I want to be sensitive to this. So to anybody who's never done psychedelics, I first want to say that most of the things that you hear people say about them that sounds hyperbolic, they really are not hyperbolic. Like, it really is that jarring, and it is justifiable to say things like, when you smoke DMT, it feels more real than real. It's actually justifiable. It's the same experience you have when you wake up in the morning and you had a really vivid dream, but then you wake up to reality, to this reality, and then you kind of discern. You go, oh, right, that was a dream. Okay. So it feels like that, only this is the dream. Like, it just goes one level up. It really feels that way. So that already is very surprising for a lot of people, which is why DMT kind of holds this title of a very interesting thing that people study. But the code has even a further surprising quality than that, in that it almost becomes, so these are just kind of the images that people drew, but the way it appears, if you pull up the PDF, if you have a way to do that, there, the AI image, that it's in the next email in the same thread, should be there. There you go. So if you go down, so this is a paper of the experiment that we've published in physics newsletter. Go down a little more. So right there. So this is an AI generated image, obviously, and it doesn't exactly look like that, but you're looking at an infinite field, 3D. It goes infinitely into the z-axis. The characters usually don't stop. They're not on the surface. It's almost like you're looking through a glass into a world, and that world contains these infinite structures. The characters are almost secondary, but they're very surprising because they're extremely high def. Like, they're very, very high definition. You can see them super clearly. They're not fleeting in the same way that usually hallucinations present themselves in. And they make up this entire megastructure. What you see is these balls, as these soccer balls. It's like an infinite field of buckyballs made out of these language symbols, and they are moving in 3 different axes. So there's enormous columns that are kind of moving forward and backwards, and they are these buckyballs. They don't sit evenly distributed like you see in this image, but they're sitting on these columns. And the buckyballs, to anybody who doesn't know, it's basically like the soccer ball shape. In geometry, it's called truncated icosahedrons. They have different number of sides, and usually the tiles that make them up, they're hexagons or pentagons. And so they're moving around the buckyball. So the buckyballs, they kind of seem to be rotating, and then the columns move back and forth, and also the characters switch in their own spot. You remember, like in the old when we were at the airport back in the day, and the way that the board would change the numbers, right? Or like an old briefcase when you change the code, right? So it kind of
Mhm.
goes like they all change like in one spot like that, and it all happens at once, and there's millions of them.
They all change
So
simultaneously at one spot.
all well, yeah, they're constantly like moving, and they're doing this change in one spot. Like it's almost like they're rotating into another space that you don't see, almost like there's like a wheel that goes away from your view and comes back in every single point in space. And so there's like millions of them, and they're
Huh.
super coherent. So imagine that I'm projecting a light on this mug.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it looks like. It looks like an object that is being illuminated by the laser. So when you're asking me, when you blink, what happens, it doesn't have that kind of a fleeting quality. It's almost like you're asking me what happens to the mug when you're blinking. Well, nothing. The mug
So
is there. Like
it has persistence.
it has space permanence and its own behavior. You can move your head around it. It behaves like a regular object. You can move the light across it, and you will see it's like just being replaced by other portions of the structure. So you're literally illuminating something in the dark, so to speak. It's on every surface. The code doesn't seem to be changing with the surface. There's certain surfaces that it's a little harder to see because you just have to kind of refocus your eyes. So if you project it on your skin, you see it, but you have to refocus your eyes to converge deeper into the surface. It's almost like you're looking through versus at. And that's what got a lot of people. We now have thousands of observations worldwide. People email me all the time. We in fact we built a tool thanks to our software engineer Carmelo and my business partner Carter. They built this tool called veilbreak.ai, which is basically a repository of all people doing these experiments, and people can just share anonymously if they don't want to.
Well, it became a big trend on like TikTok. People are talking about this, and I know at least one person in real life who's reported exactly what you shared with me, and that person is credible and real, and I trust them. So
yeah, we had scientists who
so professional. Go ahead,
yeah. You have no idea how many people email me. I don't know the exact number, but a serious number. Like we thought over the years, I would say it's at least close to 100 people that are professionals in their field. We're talking about doctors, lawyers. I had a judge email me. So like people that tell me, "Hey, I can never speak about this because I will literally lose everything I ever worked for." But keep going. Like I've seen this. Like, and they tell me sometimes they see it under other conditions. Sometimes people see code when they just kind of wake up in the middle of the night. It's almost like a pre-render right before they start like seeing regular life. They kind of see this like code, and everybody kind of assumed, or a lot of people assumed, oh, it's just some kind of a quirk of my brain just projecting language, which by the way is not a weird assumption to make. I would say if we look at Occam's razor, that's a more safe assumption to make than you seeing some kind of a code of reality, right? But what stands out about this experiment is because the holy grail in psychedelic research from the ontological perspective. We're not talking now about healing. Everybody now knows this is already, a known fact at this point. There's enormous amounts of real data from Johns Hopkins, from many other centers, medical centers in the world, that psychedelics can help tremendously with certain health issues and mental issues. Mushrooms really, under the right conditions,
Johns
they can help.
Hopkins, NYU, Imperial College.
Exactly.
We all have research around this. No, I know someone in my family who had postpartum depression and suicidal ideation, and psychedelics helped her immediately, where like nothing else did. And so that was yet another piece of evidence that I saw. I said, "Gee, like how come people aren't talking about this?"
It's coming. The numbers are staggering. So Johns Hopkins, if I remember the numbers correctly, they showed that if people have a transcendent experience with mushrooms, they have to have it. They have a definition of it. So like there's a certain level of experience that people have to reach to have that. But if they do, they showed up to 83%, if I remember correctly, uh, full cessation of heavy addictions with as little as 1 or 2 sessions. So like completely quit smoking cigarettes after smoking for 40 years, completely stop alcohol, completely like that's crazy. Just like complete cessation. And that's a longitudinal study. So they follow people for years. They're like, check that they didn't go back, So we know for sure that there's enormous potential in terms of therapeutics. But there's another component to psychedelics, which is this whole thing, which is like, okay, what are we looking at? Is this just kind of like inside of our heads? Because it definitely doesn't feel that way when people are
Right.
in the presence of these
Is it
things.
phenomena or is it ontological? Is it real or
Is
is
it
it
real? Exactly. And that ontological question, the holy grail in this question, is replicability. Like, because people do talk about similar things, right? They would say, oh, yeah, I also saw a gesture, or I also saw this thing. But that's still very flimsy because you can always, well, Carl Jung, you can always chuck it to archetypes. You can say, well, there's some fundamental level of the human mind, this archetypical level that is just kind of has the same building blocks. So that's not crazy that you saw a jester and I saw a jester because it's one of the archetypes. Let's say, right? That can be an explanation. But with something like this, if I can replicate this basically 100% of the time with the same observation, that is a different story now. Now, there's a long way to go because, the claim is so enormous that to really nail it down as a truth about reality, we're going to have to go through quite a few more turns um, with the amount of things that science would throw at it, and I'm all for it, by the way. But it gets us definitely one step closer. And as I told you off camera, the thing we're trying to do now, I started a nonprofit called Code of Reality, and we're officially now in operation. And we are trying to see if we can create any perturbation to either the code or whatever it is that we're looking at, or at least our observation of it in a way that is replicable across individuals. Because if I can do this, so for example, if I turn on a really powerful electromagnet in the room and something happens while I'm looking at this thing under the conditions described, and then somebody else who's also with me in the room sees the same thing, okay, now we have something very, I got to turn this off into the OS. Now we have something very, very serious, because
Right.
that tells
You're
you
trying
that
to influence the perception and see if it's shared with others, and can two subjective experiences have some confirmation? This is the issue. You're at the limits of the scientific method. Normally, we have a shared objective experience and we have a measurement. In this case, you have a subjective experience and you're trying to see whether that shared experience occurs with a third party. Now, you've already shown that thousands of people experience what you described here, but you haven't yet shown that people have a shared experience at the same time. Is that accurate?
we have, absolutely. No, we had 15 people in the room and they're all pointing at the same thing and talking about the same
They
thing at the
describe
same
the
time.
same character sequences and locations.
Well, no, not character sequences. It's true that you
Okay.
can't nail that down because there's just too much happening all at once. But you can reasonably assume just by people's attention and how it goes. So, for example, some event would happen inside. So, like something that would kind of happen a certain way, and three people would be like, you see that? Be like, so okay. So even if they don't see the exact sequence of characters, or even if we can't know if they're saying the exact same sequence of characters, we know they just saw something happening in there. All three of them.
And they identify events simultaneously.
Exactly.
Now,
And you have to, and this is where you identified the problem correctly. This is the limits of the scientific method, because currently the scientific method does things with the assumption that there's an external world, and then we are just some kind of a derivative of it. So the physical world is prior to us, so to speak, right? It is the fundamental thing. Therefore, the way we have to verify things for ourselves is if we can do something physical to the thing that we're studying, and then have some device verify to us, yeah, that's you. There's really something there that I'm bouncing off of, and therefore you can be reasonably safe in your assumption that yes, there's something there, right? That's kind of how it's done. But for example, in neuroscience, notice that even though we are relying on very sophisticated brain scans, the cash value of these brain scans only comes online when you compare it with what people report about it. So, like, because we all feel sadness, let's say, we all kind of know what it is. Even if I don't know that if your sadness feels exactly like mine, but if I see a certain facial expression on your face and I'm a good friend of yours and I come over, is it reasonable to say that I know you're sad? And then if I ask you, you say, yeah, something happened. Like, so what happened there? The fact that I don't exactly know if your sadness is exactly like mine, I understand the neighborhood of what this emotion is. So there's enough there for me to interact with you on, even though I don't have access to your internal space and exactly how you feel it. So I think that this is where we have to loosen up a little bit, especially when we're talking about kind of like the cutting edge understanding about being able to nail down the exact, let's say, characters, right? I don't I don't know if the color of the couch is exactly the same one for you, but I know we can both sit on the couch, right? So it's like
Right,
there's things that
right.
we can compare,
Qualia,
right?
we don't, we both don't know that we have this shared experience of red. There's a qualia,
The quality,
and
yeah, yeah.
you
But the
can,
specifics do matter. You're right, and I would say that at least in the beginning, so you can do a lot. For example, but you can get quite a bit done just by getting the right people. So, for example, if you have somebody who's, you know, been a hippie their whole lives and their mind is blown out of everything. I love them. I have a lot of friends like that. But like, if somebody just like really, really like, oh man, yeah, like they're into it, and then they see it and they go like, dude, that's far out, right? I'm just doing this as a caricature to illustrate who I'm talking about. Then yeah, their report would be a little less. It would stick less because they're too open, right? But if somebody comes in, not like anti, but like, somebody who's like scientifically minded, interested in what in fact is going on, open minded, but also very skeptical. And when they see it, they go, yo, what? Like they're surprised. That's a data point. That is a data point. There's something about their perception of it in which they were interested in knowing what in fact is going on, and they're surprised. I would say that's something, right? And then when you have thousands and hundreds of these accounts, then you all of a sudden we do become to some degree the data collecting device for now, until maybe in the future we have some advanced version of Neuralink that can just record directly from your cortex or something. Okay, well now then no problem. Then we can just agree what we see.
what's
I really
interesting.
think. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's funny that your setup involves laser diffraction, which is also the same setup that's involved in quantum mechanics
Double
and
slit experiment. Yep.
the double slit experiment, and um, the when you measure, you collapse the probability distribution and you start to have an event, and prior to measurement, you have a wave function that describes reality, and that's our best physics. And none of it makes any sense, and none of it's intuitive at all. But it is the best physics we have because we can make predictions of it.
And we can build devices through it. Yes. That's the
Yes.
thing that ultimately tells us that something is there. Yeah.
Correct. Now, there was an individual whose book I read, I don't know, like 12 years ago, 15 years ago. His name was Dr. Richard Strassman.
Mhm.
He's an MD. He's a real doctor. He studied medicine at Albert Einstein University in New York, and he was at UC Davis. And he wrote a book called The Spirit Molecule. And essentially what he did is he had subjects and volunteers volunteer to be under an IV drip of sustained DMT. I've got some pretty interesting books up here. That's one of them. So, and you read the reports, you're like, what is going on? And they have reports of experiences with these entities. And what's interesting is that different experiences report similar phenomena with similar kinds of entities. So two questions. One, have you ever talked to Dr. Strassman? What are your reactions to that?
Yeah. So great thing to mention. Yeah. Dr. Strassman did his modern version. Well, now no longer the modern version, but like the in between, the semi-modern version of these experiments. We did conduct some of those in the 50s. And then he kind of picked up after many years, decades of hiatus because of the way that the government came down on these things. And he did the study in New Mexico in the 90s. And he's kind of nowadays considered the OG of our modern. He reopened the modern era of this of psychedelic research. There's a modern version of what he did, which is now called DMTX. It's a blanket name for all investigative attempts with DMT that are asked from the ontological perspective. So it's whenever we asked, is it really real in a laboratory condition? That's called DMTX, and it's called DMTX because they do intravenous drip of the molecule. Usually, when you smoke the molecule, it only lasts for 5 to 10 minutes. There you go. Intravenously, you can basically do it, which is what he did. He didn't do extended states, so he just basically gave people DMT intravenously. He was involved in helping the people who are now doing DMTX dialing in some of the details. And the person who did it with him was Dr. Andrew Gallimore, who we are in contact with. I met a few times with him, and he figured out the exact equation of how to keep the levels of DMT in your bloodstream in such a way that you can basically stay there indefinitely. So they started the study in Imperial College in London, and there was a beginning of that in Colorado, but as far as I know, they never really fully like took off with the actual research. So Imperial College is where most of the modern data comes from, and there's now a study that started in San Diego by Dr. John Dean. Same thing, and in fact, the guy who used to be the chemist for the DMTX in Colorado, he started his own thing now. His name is Kevin, and he does this thing with his partner Haley. They're incredible. And we went on for the film, but also for the investigation. We went on, and I did the extended state. And actually, funny enough, we didn't try to do that, but it seems that I ended up being basically holding the world record how long people stayed there with DMO.
Wow.
So I stayed for 5 hours, and if I understand it correctly, somebody did do a 6.5 hours, but I did, I think, like 30 times more. So like I ended up with
record for the human being under a sustained DMT drip.
463 milligrams over 5 hours. Maybe somebody broke. I have no idea. We weren't trying to break a world record or anything like this. We were just like studying.
Well, let's unpack that in a moment. So for folks
Sure.
that don't understand DMT, so DMT stands for dimethyltryptamine.
Correct.
It's found in humans. It's found in trace amounts in blood. It's found in plants. It's found in other mammals also. There's some theories out there, like Wim Hof. People may be familiar with Wim Hof, who they call him the Iceman. He helped popularize cold showers and other things, and he's got like breathing techniques. There's some theories out there that certain forms of breathing can endogenously produce DMT and create altered states. Tim Ferriss has interviewed some of these people, like Dr. Stanislav Grof, who's written multiple books, who's a professor at UC Berkeley. These are real people doing like decades of research. But anyway, that's an interesting thread, people can explore. And DMT is also the active ingredient in these psychedelics, which you mentioned, 5-MeO DMT and others. Okay, so you've done the longest sustained trip. How?
And I smoked 5-MeO on top of it while I was they were shooting me to space.
and you're allowed to tell us a story.
Well, Colorado is it's decriminalized there, so yes.
Okay, so a few things.
Yeah,
1,000 questions come to mind here. Number one, what was your subjective experience of time versus the actual reported measurement of time?
I've never had the time stretch thing. Never experienced it in my life. So like people report this, and this is a very common thing where people like, they will be there for 5 minutes and it would feel like eternity, which is very common reported. I've never experienced it. I've kind of always know how long it has been. Sure, maybe small stretches in the same vein you would have when you're drunk or something. Like you're not really sure, but not in that very profound way of like more. And I'm trying to be sensitive to people who've never done these things. So I do want to maybe try and connect it to something a little bit more tangible for them. Sure. One of the most jarring elements about the molecule is the thing I already mentioned, which is that it feels more. Like it's almost like reality becomes super HD. Everything is more. It doesn't feel like you're high. It feels like you're going unhigh, like in the other direction. Like this was the subtle version, and all of a sudden you no longer, it just becomes more. And when you do something like an extended state, so the way they go in the extended state, because again, it like you said, it's a neuromodulator that our body makes. So we know that we have DMT in our lungs, so we think our lungs make it. I think the liver, some portions of the brain, if I'm not mistaken, ironically not the pineal gland, as far as I can tell, that was a myth that was busted a long time ago. But there's two kinds of dimethyltryptamine. There's NN dimethyltryptamine, which is what people mean by DMT usually. It's just two nitrogen attached to it, and 5-MeO DMT, which is 5-methoxy and then oxygen.
Right,
So
that's known as like the toad medicine, El Bufo. It's a
Exactly.
indigenous tribes
yeah,
scrape the medicine from a frog and ingest that, usually in some kind of ceremony. And that's also known as like the most powerful psychedelic known to man. That's what Mike Tyson took,
exactly.
and it flattened him, and he came back, I guess, like more humble, and he had a conversation with something powerful.
Yeah, I always say that if there's a stronger experience than that, I don't want to know about it. The 5-MeO is up there. Like it's the closest I think you can get to, in fact, being in the presence of God. On this side, as Terence used to say, on the yawning grave. Like this is like as close as you're gonna get. This is truly, people come out of it and they're like, what? They can't believe what they just saw or experienced.
Sure.
And they're very different in their execution. In fact, almost diametrically opposite in that the NN and 5-MeO. NN is very content driven. So if anybody ever done even a little bit of magic mushrooms and saw some, little wiggles or a lot of hallucinations, if you do copious amounts of mushrooms and you get insane hallucinations, that's where DMT begins. That's baseline. And then if you smoke more, you just torpedoed out of your body into like some other place that is completely alien to ours. And it's very content filled. So it's almost like, imagine Transformers from 2,000 years in the future, and you're seeing it. It's something like that. 5-MeO feels much more on the, I would say, kind of like the spiritual. Everything just dissolves, and it's enormous standing waves of energy that are moving through your body. You fully are stripped away from your perception of the self. There's no mapping anymore. There's like, literally, you can't map anything to anything else. You're just out. And you feel like you're in the presence of something truly divine. The way I like to describe it sometimes, it's almost like God literally comes in your presence to the extent that you can perceive what God would be, and tells you everything is all right. Like, it's just like, hey, just seriously, don't worry about it. Like, I got this. Like, everything is exactly where it needs to be. That's kind of the experience. And on both, by the way, we see the code. We were very surprised, this, as a side note, we were very surprised that on 5-MeO you could see the code, because usually you just like fully dissolve. But if you happen to catch the laser, if you open your eyes, you will see the code even clearer than you see it on anything else. And to your point about like the fact that it's natural, it is one of these interesting facts about specifically DMT, because all the other things you don't have in your body naturally, but DMT is in many living things, like in plants, in animals, in humans. And in fact, the guy that I mentioned from San Diego, Dr. John Dean, he in 2019 did a study with rats. And if you just do Dr. John Dean 2019 study with rats, you will find, you would find what that is. But basically he found, because we used to think that we have trace amounts of DMT in the system, and then this is where some of the rumors came about. Maybe when we die, DMT is the molecule in which the soul sits, so to speak. So it's like, there you go. And then you basically, you're propelled from your body. That's why it was dubbed the spirit molecule. Actually, Dr. Rick Strassman talks about it in his book. So the paper can be summarized. Basically, he found that in rats, at least, which they're mammals that are very similar to the way that kind of our body works, there's strong evidence of the precursors that make DMT during waking hours. So the precursor to what then makes DMT is present in large amounts. So basically, you can say that what he essentially discovered, that there's high evidence for the idea that we might have comparable amounts in rats, at least. This was never studied in humans. But if this is discovered in humans in the same way, what it would mean is that we have comparable amounts of DMT in our intracranial fluid to dopamine and serotonin. So substantial amounts. Now, why is that significant? That means the body doesn't just make substantial amounts of something that the brain can interact with, because the brain is pretty conservative with what it allows in and why. and the brain seems to be almost specialized in processing DMT. So if we have substantial amounts of it during waking hours in our system, that tells us something, that it means that it's doing something very important and not just some kind of a side function. And there's some ideas about, like, is it actually the thing that renders qualia? Is it the thing that, there's all these ideas. We don't know, of course, but it is a very interesting data point, because if we don't have trace amounts but we have serious amounts, we're all carrying. Terrence used to say, like, it's completely illegal, but we all carry because it's all
Yeah,
in our
it's an
system.
interesting question, because we still don't know the answer to the hard problem of consciousness, which
It
David
probably
Shaw
never will be.
probably never will. It's not clear
Yeah.
how in principle you could ever test that. But the hard problem of consciousness is, where does subjective experience come from? Where does consciousness come from? It's not, the presence of matter does not imply consciousness. The presence of neural correlates in a brain does not imply subjective experience. There's a gap.
Correlated, but it's not it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And some people don't even understand the problem, which just blows my mind.
Right.
But so to tie it to what we're talking about, why does all of this stuff with the rats, and why is this important? Well, here's the thing: if we have enough of this thing in our system all the time, it does something substantial. When we smoke more of it, it gives us all the effects that I was just describing, right? So what does that mean? Because it really feels more real. Are you experiencing more of what's possible to experience? Is that what's happening? Is it responsible for the amount of quote unquote computational rendering that is possible in your brain? Is it giving you more computational steps per second, so to speak? It's almost like you accelerate the pace with which your brain can process, and that's what gives it we don't know. But these questions are very prominent, and they're very important to ask, and some very smart people on this planet do ask them, luckily. And I think that the laser does allow us at least some form of a handle, if for no other reason by the fact that you can repeat it reliably.
Right. It opens a window of inquiry.
Yeah.
So even though you might sound totally crazy, you can say, hey, you can try this yourself and you can see this phenomena, and let's have a conversation.
Yeah. And one very important caveat: this is by no means a promotion, because of the amount of, this is big, right? Not just talking about the laser, talking about the experience is so big. The reason it's not for everybody, not everybody are born to be astronauts. So, like, this can destabilize somebody for sure. Like, if you're not ready to my mind, the thing that really sends some people spinning, I think that different people have different tolerance levels to novelty. Some people are really happy with just kind of like what they know, and this is good. I like this. And if that's who you are, this is not for you. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not everybody can be free divers. It's just not for that. It's such an enormous experience, but it definitely tells us something way more fundamental about the world than I would say most of mainstream science currently entertains, even though there's way more open-mindedness about it than I realized. I gave a talk to physicists in the IPI talks series, which is the Information Physics Institute in England. And the receptivity was out of this world. I did not expect. I was very careful. I was preparing for like a month, because physicists are very rigorous. They don't, like, you slip one time with what you think you understand, and you kind of, they treat you differently after that. And it was such an incredible receptivity, and just there was way more openness than I expected, because I think that physicists do understand that there's some big component we're missing about consciousness that can no longer be swept under the rug, because it's the thing that starts the picture. Like, you can't. There's even Ed Witten, which, to anybody who doesn't know, is kind of considered by many physicists kind of like the physicist of all time, and definitely of our time. He's the father of M theory, which is the unification of all string theories. And in a recent interview he gave to Brian Greene, he said, I actually came to a conclusion that ultimately all of these measurement problems do eventually consolidate into, what do we think knowing means, and therefore what is the observer. And it actually really surprised Brian Greene. I don't think he expected this. He said, wait, are you saying that consciousness might hold an actual key to some fundamental physics questions? He's like, What can I tell you? Like, think about this. Like, what does knowing mean? Like, when a mind holds information in a certain way, there's something there, and that operation is being ignored from the equations. It's not in the equations, but it is the thing that arbiters ultimately meaning out of everything. So you can't separate those two. So even the most serious physicists are definitely thinking about that. They just don't necessarily always know how to treat it mathematically, because that's the only language that physics speaks, right? So you don't have a handle. You can't like put something in the equations, but it is a question that needs to be asked from that direction for sure. And maybe, just maybe, the laser might allow us to do something like this. I am on very firm belief that the delivery would be from 0 to 100 the second we can create that perturbation. Because if I can create the slightest perturbation, it doesn't matter what it is. If it doesn't matter if I create a perturbation in whatever that thing is, the code, if it's just executes in a slightly different way, or I'm just putting something next to somebody's brain and it changes their perception of it reliably in the same way as for others. Well, if for no other reason than just the fact that now you have a binary, and the second you have a binary, you can compute. So if I can point a camera at a difference of any kind in any point in space, you can make all surfaces into a hard drive.
Let me share a digression briefly on computation.
Sure.
So there's a physicist named David Deutsch. I also have his two books.
One of my favorite thinkers.
Really, really incredible. He's a scientist. He's a physicist. He wrote The Fabric of Reality, and he developed quantum computation as a theory. He's published papers. He's a physicist at the University of Oxford, and he's one of the few physicists that connects computation with quantum mechanics and the philosophy of reality. Very profound thinker.
Epistemology. Yeah.
High epistemology. Epistemology and go ahead, yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, it's funny you mentioned him, because when I got my first big hint, I was thinking exactly about Deutsch's description of the double-slit experiment in The Fabric of Reality. He has a very unique way of describing it.
It's an incredible, yeah, no, I agree. So his conclusion, go ahead, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go. I'm just like, I'll be super excited about Deutsch.
We'll come back to simulation theory.
I'm excited about Deutsch. I'm excited about I read the Beginning of Infinity second book maybe 30 times. Like seriously, like it's just
it's a book that needs to be read in solitude with an espresso on a mountain. I read it in Glacier National Park. It takes a lot of focus. The ideas are very simple, but to really understand them takes a lot of concentration. But the conclusion of his interpretation of the double split experiment is that there's parallel universes. And he explains his reasoning, which we won't get into here, step by step, premise by premise. And I remember reading it 10, 15 times, just like working out my hands, like, yeah, I see what he's saying. And it's not like a guess. He's saying this is inferential. Like, let me show you. Premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, conclusion. And so when Google did their first quantum computing experiment, and they validated. So let me share this briefly, and we'll get back into the main thread here.
Yeah, he developed the Deutsch equations, which basically made quantum computers possible.
Exactly. So, according to Google, Willow, which is a quantum computer, solved a computational problem in under 5 minutes, a task that would have taken the world's fastest supercomputers approximately 10 septillion years. David Deutsch's explanation of this is only possible if multiple universes exist. The computation is actually happening across universes because the quantum computer is interacting with itself and it's precipitating out a solution, and cannot achieve that in this 5 minutes time frame unless other universes exist. There's actually evidence for that. So that's an interesting digression someone can do with GPT 5.2 to understand.
It's not a digression. You hit the bullseye. I'm so happy about it. It's not a digression at all. This is literally the center of my ideation. Yeah. The way that I came to the first hint is that I was walking in the middle of the night and I noticed that the stoplight, when it was changing colors, the way that light was spreading between for each color looked different to my eyes when I would squint a little. Now, I knew that there must be many reasons why that's happening. Like maybe the glass sits a little different. Maybe they just use different glass for each color. Who knows, right? But there was something in that instance of, because what I was thinking is exactly about the description you just gave. I think it's chapter 2 or 4, one of those in the Fabric of Reality, and in it, Deutsch basically describes the difference between the Copenhagen interpretation, which is that the wave function collapses, and the many worlds interpretation, or the Everettian interpretation,
right. And
in
he's an
which
Everett. Yeah.
obviously, and all serious like Sean Carroll, who's like very mainstream physicist, like everybody basically think of Everettian interpretation as the main one currently. Well, I'm not in the physics community. I don't know if that's true about everybody, but a lot of very serious physicists. So then basically what he explained is that the reason that the Copenhagen interpretation is incoherent is because what it does, it basically tells you, and here magic happens. It just tells you this wave function, whatever it is, collapses. It describes no mechanisms by which it collapses. It just says, oh, it just becomes one. It's like, okay, but where's all the other possibilities?
Right.
So then he says, well, if we're doing physics and we're not doing some theoretical philosophy, then we have to, you can't have something that isn't influencing something that is. If you're saying something is a potential or a field of pure potential, the second you said it's just pure potential, you stopped doing physics. What does that mean? Like in physics, we measure things that influence one another by some mechanisms. So if there was a field in which these potentials existed, these potentials, you don't get to just say they went away without describing how they went away. Then you have to postulate they're there. You just become not aware of them anymore. And the mechanism by which you become unaware of them anymore basically is what's called decoherence. Your world line, that particle becomes part of your world line, and in that it decoheres from the larger wave function. But the rest of the possibilities still exist. They just exist in a parallel worlds right next to you. And what we're utilizing when we're doing quantum computing is literally this lateral computation across the worlds. We literally share a computation with all the other parallel universes, and we use fancy mathematical tools like the Deutsch equations to discern where we are on this map, so to speak. Like, what is the probability of us being this or that? And then you almost like reverse engineer, almost like a, what is it called? I'm spacing on it right now. Basically, you reverse engineer like where you sit on the
right. You're sampling the universe, the probability to draw. And briefly, what Deutsch is saying is the diffraction pattern, which is what happens when light goes through a double slit, is a result of light interfering with itself in another universe. You can create a diffraction pattern with light through a double slit, but the problem is that you create a diffraction pattern if you send only one photon at a time. And then the puzzle is, well, how is a diffraction pattern forming if you're only sending one photon through? Because a photon can't interact with itself.
But it can if it is a multidimensional object, it interacts with instances of itself across the worlds, which sounds insane.
Sounds insane.
However, but we made something very substantial work with it, and without it working, maybe it wouldn't have the same.
Right, we built a quantum computer that operates.
Yeah, they work.
They work.
Exactly. They work. Yeah. So I'm so happy you brought this up, because usually I don't go there because it's too many details, but you made it so easy to like jump to the bullseye of it. You have no idea how central this is. So this is exactly what I was thinking, because I said to myself, remember when I said I started doing first principle assumptions? I said, okay, light is involved. What is this space? Why do I see them sometimes and sometimes I don't? And there was something about that instance when I thought all of this. It's almost like somebody grabbed me by the shoulders and went, yes, look there. And I was like, whoa, like it was so strong. So then what I was thinking is that instance of the particle interacting with itself, that's one bit of information, or that one decoherence that the quantum computer uses from the state of being in a superposition to being in a conclusive position, and that's the moment of computation. So they keep it. That's why they have to cool it down. They keep the coherence long enough, and then they decide when decoherence happens, and that's when they run the kind of like the final conclusion happens. And I thought, okay, but in that instance of it doing that, of interacting with instances of itself, there's one bit of information being transferred. So maybe there's a way, something about diffusion of light, There's a way maybe to communicate between the worlds. Back then, I wasn't really thinking about the simulation theory or anything like this. I was just thinking parallel worlds or something like that. And the second I thought that, that's the moment that that thing happened, when it was like, yes, that's exactly the direction you want to be looking at. And even from that moment, it still took, I think, 4 years total of ideation and still thinking about it and connecting dots and all that stuff. Only then I kind of reached the conclusion that the lasers should have been maybe on the surface, but it wasn't. It's not. When you don't know, you don't know. There's so many different possibilities. But there is definitely, what's interesting is that if we project the light without the diffraction lens, so if it's just a laser pointer, even if you blow it up, so if you go far enough and you open the dot to be like a circle, you won't see the code. It's only if you put it through a diffraction lens. Now, here's why this is both interesting and weird. Because what diffraction means, it's just the bouncing of photons off of something. That's it. So in the diffraction lens, you also have a really accurate calculation of the wavelength. So they spread apart the slits, a lot of them, in the distance from one another that matches the wavelength. But for all intents and purposes, the second the laser hits the wall, and because most walls are obviously not perfectly smooth, that's already diffraction. So why would we only see it under this particular diffraction and not when it hits the wall? And that's so, questions like these, they are mini handles. Like they're not quite, it's not quite influencing it, like I said, but it is an interesting point. And the more we have agreements about like how the code appears or doesn't appear under different conditions, tells us something about how to proceed. And one of the things that I think is correct, and it's the assumption we're working from now, is the holographic principle, which is that it's almost like what we're doing is in a hologram, you have a sophisticated way of recording an object in such a way that not only the amplitude is recorded, so not just how bright or less bright a pixel is, but also the phase, which gives you more information about the image. So when you record what's called the light field, you don't record an image from one angle where the camera was and took the shot. You record it from all possible angles. So literally, you have the information in the sheet of the holographic sheet of, if you're going to move around, it will basically, depending on your angle, it will translate the light field information about exactly how this object would look like from all different angles. And the holographic principle, you probably know this because it sounds like you love this stuff, is one of the leading candidates currently in mainstream physics to be the most likely frame through which we should look at all physical theories. So in other words, we do live in some kind of a holographic universe. In other words, the universe is actually encoded on some external surface, and what we see as the three-dimensional world is basically like a projection inward, so to speak. And I do think that there's something there. My assumption is that the holographic part that we are is the reference light, which is the light responsible for recording the phase. So our conscious perception is the reference light, and the changes of the angle is, when you move the angle, is actually the way that the world would appear to you exactly from the angle of where you're seeing it. And what physical is there you go. What physical is in this model of mine is the instantiation of the reference light, the object light that is going through probably a quantum Turing machine. That basically, the light field of the universe is not encoding a particular object, but the computational possibility of all possible objects. And what changes the way that the world unfolds for every individual is the exact angle by which they are perceiving it as the reference light. So all the potential computational information is encoded in the fabric of reality itself, like the bulk. So space-time itself, that will be the sheet in our case. And the resolution of the sheet is basically probably Planck scale. And then when the reference light changes, it perceives the laws of physics from this particular angle that look that way. And the reason that most humans perceive probably in a very similar way is because we are looking from a similar angle. Now it might have some slight variations, but it's a similar angle. And according to Stephen Wolfram, who's also a physicist and a a technologist, he actually thinks through his new physics model that there's something that he developed called the Ruliad, which is basically the kind of the graph that describes all possible rules. He says that it makes perfect sense to him that if a species that is looking at the universe from a different part of the rule graph, even though they are looking at the same laws of physics, the laws of physics from their angle might look different. So even the laws of physics might appear different because of the different angle from the rule space. And that matches perfectly. Now, why do I even mention this? Because this sounds so like, okay, now you're just talking some, out there stuff that who knows, man? Why does it even enter your mind to even think like that? Well, it's testable because we do know what happens when you move the angle of the reference light. The departure from the observation, we know what happens when you change it by 30 degrees, by 50 degrees. All we got to do is figure out if any of this is true and not just metaphorical. What we got to do is figure out what exactly denotes the change of the angle of the reference light in our case. What causes the change in it? And what that might be is exactly what DMT does. DMT might be either opening the aperture to more perception of more angles of the reference light, so you can see more of what's possible, or it literally changes the angle. So it's almost like you're looking in a different place in the possible space of what reality really is. And I do have a strong suspicion that powerful magnets might actually do the trick. So we actually actively trying to figure out how to design this experiment in such a way that we can look at the whole thing either inside of an MRI machine or something that involves very powerful magnets around the human that doesn't hurt the humans can withstand quite powerful magnetic fields, and to see if we see any perturbation, and or maybe even in some way trying to put it behind a surface, so like actually see if it actually changes anything in the perceived space itself. But yeah, but Deutsch's ideas are central to this, which is because that was my original thought about if we can communicate between the worlds, and that's what gave rise to this whole project actually.
Let's shift gears to your experience, your subjective experience when you're under this DMT drip. So what people report, back to Dr. Strassman's book, is interactions with entities, right? Terence McKenna has also written about this. I think quite a few people have at this point too. What was your experience like?
Specifically with that one, because I'm really familiar with the space. So my experience is a little different than I would say most people. I'm at this point kind of seeing the behind the scenes. So I'm also seeing the stuff that makes the content. And for all intents and purposes, this is where I lose a lot of people because it just sounds crazy. But I have almost like an open line. Like if I smoke, I reliably see them. They talk back. Like for all intents and purposes, I have direct communication.
You have conversations
with whomever is responsible for the construct. I don't rely on this much because cool story, bro, right? Like who cares? Like, okay, that's your experience. Sure. So I don't expect it to hold water for anyone. But it is relevant to your question because I usually see the kind of the behind the scenes. And when we just started the experiment, when it comes on, they came out, like I saw them kind of coming through their portals, and then they're like, okay, we think you should do this. And I'm like, sure. And they took me into heavenscapes, like took me into like kind of like angel world. That was the first. So it was the most blissful, just all it was. The theme was morality, ethics, also universal ethics. How these things really unfold. What is the significance of us learning how to be more of an ethical species and moral individually, and how it actually ties to the larger picture and our potential. So it was really, profound, and I just fully went in. It's the most. You just like in sea of love, inside of a sea of love that all it does, it basically expresses the the deepest human potential through exactly who you are. So it's very personal. So it's not just that there's this enormous picture, but how you are plays a role in how the whole thing unfolds for all of us, by the way. So that was my initial
What does that
experience in it.
mean for how you are?
Well, think about it this way. When you so the way you do things is as important as what you do, and they are a derivative of one another. Certain attitudes give rise to certain actions. So if you're the kind of person who only thinks about how to use other people for your own benefit, even if you're really good at putting a nice face, it doesn't escape the matrix. It doesn't escape the system that you're doing that, right? Like it's only invisible to other people, which even that probably is not true, but it's not invisible to the system, and it will reliably place you in world lines and trajectories and understandings and ideas you would be interacting with that match that kind of attitude and energy. So you might be innovative in that field. So like, for example, psychopaths are real. Like they're a small percentage of the population, but they are. And they, we know there's certain people that just simply have no, for whatever reason, they're wired different, that they have no regard whatsoever to what other people feel, and everything is tool to them, for them. So you can even be really good and like innovative in that space, which sounds weird, but like you can be really good at like con artistry, like you really know how to manipulate people, right? But what would always happen is that you will always be locked in this relatively tiny loop of potential that you don't realize because you locked yourself in with yourself. If all you care about is yourself, then what the world does is like, oh, okay, I get it. So then it consolidates everything to only amount to what you can gain. That's it. And that might even look a lot to some people, like, oh my God, I made $50 million. Okay. But the moment to moment experience they are experiencing is very limited, and they don't even realize it.
Limited.
The what?
So there's a connection between the ethics and morality and their potential experience in this new space. And the more egocentric, I guess, or narrow they are, then the more limited the space. So let's step back for a quick second now. So just to recap.
Sure.
So they are multiple distinct entities.
Mm-hmm.
What do they resemble? Is there any analogy we have to them? What do they look like?
Because your podcast is not around these subjects usually, I don't know how far we want to venture this.
You've already gone down the deep end.
In for a penny, in for a pound. Okay.
The last podcast we do. They might tear me out, take me somewhere.
All right. Well, they are insectoids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
or like what?
The what?
What kind of insectoids here? Just how
many? All kinds. There's a subspecies, and like I even think that maybe there's a reason why all the insects in our world look that way, because there's something about. I always say that the only thing that makes sense to me is that shape implies function. So if you see a little quagmire in water, the shape of the quagmire is because of what that function is. The surface tension of water.
Distinct kinds of insects, and you're larger, I presume, than small insects, or
all kinds. There's spiders. There's the funny thing is they're not menacing. So like I don't necessarily enjoy insects too much, but there's nothing ominous or menacing about them. They're very neutral. In fact, that's the thing that sometimes jars people because they simply don't care. They're very neutral. Like it's not up, it's not down. It's just what they do. And from my understanding, they are responsible for managing physical environments. They're almost like the thing that manages the behind the scenes of space-time itself, but they do not intervene in outcomes.
So
they just kind of do. Yeah, they kind of the mechanics. They do error correction. They can make sure that everything kind of like in place, but they're responsible for kind of like executing this layer.
Okay.
And then there's many other layers, and it goes all the way up to, I guess, what you would call the source. And that's already I would say a very different kind of thing that I honestly don't know. It sounds like a cop out, but I really don't think that anything can be delivered about it in words. It's the beyond of beyonds. I don't even think a human mind. The what?
So you're introduced to this, you call it like a heavenscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
what is that experience like? Is it what people describe with clouds? What's the experience like? Are there people there? Is just you alone? Is it a feeling? What's the experience like?
So let me actually connect to what I was saying, because it relates to your question. So what it feels like is the main thing, which is exactly what I was saying. Like if you're locked into some kind of a worldview that only includes you, then your world would feel a certain way. Therefore, it would appear a certain way.
Reflection of your
Exactly.
beliefs and values, or
I would say that there's a lot. There's like there's certain cultural convictions that are translated to imagery. So there's certain gestalts of like how it looks, right? We all kind of know what heavenscape. Like everybody has an image in their minds, probably
right,
like a Jesus and clouds and whatever it is. So it's
mhm,
not like I think that
right,
there was three clouds and they were on the right. Like that's not the thing that mattered. What
got it.
mattered is the whole imprint of meaning that is available in that space. And I think that
Right.
ultimately we are beings of meaning. Everything we do physically, even, is
Okay.
seeking certain meanings, like foods, carnal pleasures, anything we find enjoyable, and actually even not enjoyable. But there's, some people come back from war and they just can never get satisfaction of that kind, even though it sounds like a weird word to use. But you can't scratch that itch because the amount of meaning
So,
you experience in
so
in war
was
is.
it a projection of that which you found meaningful and heavenly? Was it personalized in that way then? Well,
It's for me personally. It was already because I'm very familiar with the space and how they do things. So it was just another. It's just another thing that they presented me that connected to the larger picture. The way I'm
yeah,
connecting it to the importance of what we do here was that
yeah,
thing that I told you. So, and I do want to tie this point just very shortly. If this, just like you move your hand this way, right? It's very easy. But
yeah.
if you really pay attention, you have no idea how you're doing this. You have no clue. In the same, but it's instantiated very well with how your perception usually works. So it's like you're just kind of commanded to be, right? The second you start caring about more than just yourself, about the greater good of all, first your immediate family, everybody knows how that feels, right? And then your friends. And then if you start really caring, like truly in the body, about more and more the scale of how much you truly care about, not just how much you say you care about, like you really care inside, it becomes part of your hand, so to speak. You can literally feel the world, so to speak, and then you can move the world in the same way you can move your hand, and that directly ties to your morality. Because when you care about someone else, you can only truly do that is by not treating them as someone else,
Mhm.
but by understanding there's a connection here that is more than just the physical appearance. And that's what they were showing me, that ability to execute on that level always involves some form of care, even if on the surface of it, it looks like something completely
So
different.
you
That's
got a teaching. You saw a teaching then, and that was the teaching of not identifying as separate from someone else.
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, there's this is an infinite space of exploration. But again, if we want to think about something that is relevant for people that they can maybe kind of really think about themselves, if it works or doesn't work, that would be a big one. Like if you can bring yourself to just see others, and not just as yourself, but also like as someone you really want to contribute to, the amount of magic. I know it sounds so trite, I'm sure, but just try it. Like you can't fake this. That's the problem. You can't be faking it. Like if you can really feel that, the amount of magic that would just come through you to you, like it just will automatic. In addition to all the stuff that would happen because obviously you put in the hard work and everything else, but it's almost like there's going to be all these bonuses that you didn't expect. They're just like all of a sudden would flow into your space. This abundance, and it's not a coincidence. It's because you feel through more. You bring more into your attention space. What in fact is possible to be together.
Bring more into your space abundance. That sounds like manifestation.
Of awareness, yes. The more you're aware of, the more that part can become part of your function, just like your hand is. If when you're building a business, right, it's just an extension that is less well integrated than your hand. You have to convince other people to do things. You have to do a lot of things to but it's all about alignment and integration. It's like we're doing this thing and we do a lot of physical things to signify it to one another. We rent or buy an office and we all show up there in the morning, right? those are physical actions we take to signify to one another we're together doing this, right? And then there's less that needs to happen in order to speak that. But you can also do that in a way that almost like interacts with these higher spaces. And then it's almost like you're showing up in the office one morning, and also everything else you understand about the world becomes part of your functional day, not just an idea you think about. And that's when I would say that all these ideas about manifestations, they're really the product of that. Now, people find ways to kind of circumvent that by saying, well, just have a positive feeling, have a clear vision. Yes, those are important, but those are not the thing that drives the ship. The thing that drives the ship is that connection feeling. Ultimately, that then you can aim, just like you can aim your hand. That's how you can aim other people. You can, for a little while, you can kind of boss people around, but we all know this is over time. It's unsustainable. It's too much friction. If you want it sustainable for decades and hundreds of years and thousands of years, there has to be harmony. There has to be an alignment between you and the other people, that the communication is such that now they want to be a part of that versus just told to be a part of that because they get reciprocated with currency, let's say. So that was the central part of the teaching, which is that there's a lot more that can be done. And I connected it personally. I don't think it was expressed explicitly in that space, but because that's how my mind works, I love everything has to do with the future. The thing that became apparent to me is that if we are to transform to kind of like this type 1 and type 2 on the Kardashev scale, the civilization that kind of goes and explores both external and internal, is we can only do these things if we learn how to collaborate on that level and on these time scales. If you're going to plan something for 1,000 years, you can't be operating out of this scarcity mentality where like, oh, who's gonna screw me over? Like if you have that in your mind and you live in a society in which that's possible, you can't execute a project that will take 1,000 years. You can't. There has to be an alignment.
Our individuals run fast. There's another startup expression: surround yourself with missionaries, not mercenaries. So you got some leadership lessons. What other lessons did you pick up there, or insights?
What we're bringing, this is an insight that I got a long time ago, and it also came again in that one, which is that what are we bringing to the picture? So very often we look at these things, both psychedelics and just contemplative practices, in terms of we're the students, we know nothing, and it's almost like humility, right? It's like, hey, we submit ourselves, we understand we know nothing, please teach us, kind of attitude, right? And what I saw was like, well, when you go to school, the aim of the professor isn't for you to stay a student your whole life, is to teach you how to become a good practitioner of the thing. So then the question became, I realized that it's not that we're just learning, they're learning from us too. So every single action that every being, not just human, takes in existence informs the system of something it did not know before. It's computationally irreducible. When something happens, it's completely novel for the entire system. Yes, there's some things you can kind of predict according to, but a lot of it isn't. And then for me, that was the birth of responsibility. That to understand that we do have powers that we do want to utilize, and we can choose what we utilize it for. So instead of just being the species that just kind of comes and takes and moves on, it will be a lot more fulfilling, both individually and collectively, to be the species that are kind of this beautiful emergence of art and beauty and technology, and like we build not just for functionality but also for beauty, to ornament the environment and accent and add to it, versus just kind of take and make something that is functional for us. Once again, is it just for us, or is it for the greater good of all? Because these beautiful gifts we have, like our incredible mind, can be pointed in all kinds of directions. Where we point it would largely acknowledge to reality, like what kind of things we want, and then it would determine whether the larger game will open up for us or not. It's almost like the intelligence test you have to pass in order to become a multiplanetary and then a multi maybe galactic or whatever, is not just in terms of technology. It's also in terms of these alignments or these morals. Because if you can't pass that, it's almost like, it's not like somebody's gonna not allow you in. It's just by the sheer fact that you're incapable of collaborating on that scale, you just won't, and there you're not going to go anywhere. You
Right.
have to be able to really get along, which is part of this other part of the technology, which is us, which is something I kind of briefly mentioned to you before we started, which is that what I understood is that the whole thing about the speak of AGI and all that stuff, to a lot, AGI is the wrong term, but that thing we imagine to be AGI, the mind that will arise inside the machine, we're it. So all the AIs, they're just tools. They're kind of projections of us, and ultimately they're wings that we currently only kind of look at from the side, and maybe running with like a kite, but we don't know how to wear them yet. So we are AGI, and not
We
metaphorically.
as individuals, we as a species, we as a
We as a
civilization.
species. So
Okay.
we are individuated exactly for the. Uh, so most people probably be familiar with the alignment problem, which is simply that um, AI researchers are very concerned about the fact that if real AGI would arise inside the machine, how do we make sure that it's aligned with our goals instead of just crushing us like a bug, right? Artificial
Right.
superintelligence would
Isaac
just
Asimov's robot problem. How do you ensure it
exactly.
has your best interests?
Yeah. So the way you do that is that you break it down to many, many, many individuals that believe they're separate, and you watch how they play together, which shows you what kind of incentives they carry and how they do things. And if they show, that they just take care only about themselves, there's no way that together they're going to unify to something useful. So before you allow them to fully reintegrate into one mega mind, that, by the way, if you notice, like internet, all of these things, they're just kind of like little hints of like how interconnectivity kind of works, and eventually maybe like Neuralink that literally like connects experiences. But in order to get to that level, we have to show that we are as wise as we are smart. And if we don't, again, it's not a punishment. It's more like, oh, you just didn't know how to open that key. You just didn't open it. And if you can, it's only when you fully come to an understanding together that there's way more you can achieve in terms of by utilizing collaboration than utilizing competition. Competition is a good strategy for a certain level of emergence. Like when you're still kind of playing like what we're doing now, this is about the limit. Like a level of countries, healthy competition is still good, but as you can see, it keeps sliding into these like very unpleasant situations. So then a new strategy needs to emerge, which has to start with the individual. If individuals can take personal responsibility for who they are and how they are, and you have a collection of these kind of individuals, well, that is now a real candidate to open the full thing. And then now you open gifts and you open idea spaces that are required to play out there. So in order to explore space the way that we kind of imagine in sci-fi, you can't do it from the perspective we have now, because from this angle, there's certain ideas that you can't see. It's only from this other angle that you'll be able to see the right ideas to do that. And there's also going to be a certain rapidity to these ideas. And by the way, anybody can test this. In business, it's very apparent that if there's too much of a scared mentality, again, you can go for a little while, but eventually something will constantly keep crashing down, right? In order to truly create something sustainable, you have to have a certain angle of perception of what you're doing. And surprising, maybe not that surprising, it's usually around the focus on what value are you actually bringing versus how much are you bringing in every month. So if you focus on the value, well, it sounds like what do you mean? It's just like an idea. Well, you can look at it however you want. You align your brain in a particular way and you're looking at something else. You're looking at what's the value you're bringing. You're innovating value. Great. Well, obviously that will yield
Right.
fruit because, right.
Focusing on delivering value to others. It's really service to others. Is the
Exactly. And
philosophy.
that and you can see that just creates a much more sustainable system. But what I saw is that it's actually not just kind of like a mind function. It's a larger function that it also, it's almost like a fractal. It has a larger version of itself that also occurs at the same time as it occurs to you. So one practical example is when people, and this is one that we always fall trap to, and me included, it's very easy to fall trap to, which is the finger pointing game, right? It's so easy to point to people in the news, because they're there, especially people in power, and judge, right? And it's like Trump this, Bill Gates that. I'm just using them as an example because they're people that a lot of people like to complain about, right? So okay, but then let's do this for a second. What did you do today? What did you do today to help someone else or to advance some kind of the thing that I would do it differently? Well, you can right now. You can literally do something else in your life that would actually, in addition to everything you do that day, just pick up a phone call to one of your friends, like, hey, just for no reason, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, just provide the service of making them feel seen just for 1 second. That would be a much better use of your time for the evolution of humanity as a whole, because you now setting a certain standard. And if this would be fashionable, and this would be the thing that we kind of strive to be, instead of the dominant and the powerful ones, then the amount of power that would arise from that kind of humanity is inconceivable to us currently. The amount of actual influence we'll be able to exert in any given moment would be astronomical according to our standards now.
Got it. Interesting. So you derive like an ethical, moral philosophy from your DMT experience. And
I guess it was added to a much larger picture that was already happening. But it became very clear to me that we are more than we realize. And every single instance, you ask me, what does that mean? The way that you are is how it unfolds to the rest of the thing.
Yeah.
If you walk in the room and people are happy to see you, that's a certain vibrational field. That's a certain level of something you did inside yourself. That's how you are. And that usually is accompanied by pretty brilliant ideas on a regular basis, easy way to connect with other people. You have a much easier way to execute every function throughout the day because you're not depressed and pulled down by the strings of your own emotions. So yeah, it's all tied together. But the good news is all of these big ideas are fascinating, but you can just now experience it for yourself. If you feel lack of these things, you can literally just change it immediately by stopping thinking about what all of these people out there are doing and what Elon did last week, and just right here,
what your control and be what you want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Be kind. Yeah. Be generous. Serve others. Are there one or two other experiences that stand out? Like you were in this other space longer than any other human being that we're aware of. I mean, you must have some unusual experiences, which could be super interesting to hear about.
You know, I wish I wish I could say it was mostly us trying to do all kinds of tests with the lasers.
Okay.
And there was a 5-people crew in a very small room shooting for the documentary too. There was it was yeah. I have a lot of very interesting experiences, but they all usually amount to, I don't know how much it would land with most people who've never done it. That's why I'm trying to
Right, you're afraid how it'll be received. You'll be afraid to like, will people react this way or that way?
Not afraid. I'm trying to leave people with value. So like if I tell you right now a story about some crazy being that I've experienced once, yeah, it might be interesting for like 2 seconds, but there's not much you can do with that. And that's why I'm not actually huge on trip reports. There's something that in which these things do execute themselves personally to you. So like it's the thing that makes sense to you. And then there's also the thing that it really is. And my focus was always on the thing that it really is.
I think people will find it interesting because not many people have the courage to do what you did. And they might say, hey, what he's saying kind of squares with certain views I have, and maybe I can learn from his experience. So I wouldn't diminish those trip reports.
Yeah, so there's definitely one that stands out quite a bit for me because I didn't expect it at all. And that was the now semi-famous experience I'm talking about, because a lot of people in the audience always ask for me to talk about it, but I'm not really sure what to fully make of it. But I was shown in one of my experiences, I was shown kind of, okay, here's how everything is, kind of thing. And to be clear, it does not mean that what I'm saying is that I think that necessarily it means that that's how everything is.
Sure.
But the way it was presented to me was that, which is like, that's just how everything is. And
reality.
That's how reality is constructed, like all of it.
Okay.
And I was shown that we are all kind of existing in our own simulation now in space, each and every one of us, and it's like sandboxes. So you are an avatar, like a projection in mine, but you exist on your own side. It's just that the avatar that I meet is more of a consolidation that the mainframe informs my simulation about how the real you would, what is the most likely thing you would do under these circumstances, and then it projects the action in my world, and then it watches how I behave, the real conscious me, how I behave according to it, and then it kind of studies the behavior of everything.
So am I
And
a simulation in your world? Am I projection
yes,
in your
you're a
world?
projection in my world, and vice
Do we ever
versa.
interact? Do our worlds interact?
Yes. If we enter this channel of universal love, so it's almost like the safe channel. Like if it identifies that we both managed to get into this vibration of like true acceptance, that you can call universal love, and then it would project both of us from our sandboxes, and the degree to which we are in this channel is the degree to which we're going to be closer to one another. And I thought it was funny because you know how you very often we have the experience when we fall in love that we're the only person in existence with that other person. Well, that might actually be true. Like you might be the only two conscious agents in that time, and that's why it feels different. And I think it's designed this way for safety.
Ontologically, what's happening there? So if you come into this congruence
Mm-hmm.
with this other person, then you're no longer interacting with that projection as other person. You're interacting with them
More
really
of their conscious self. Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And I think it's designed that way for safety, so like nobody really gets too hurt. And then I saw that all of that, this entire mega structure of some kind of infinite simulations, exists within some kind of a this is Cosmo, exists in some kind of a, okay, all right. Maybe we're not supposed to talk about this. This is my dog dreaming. We'll wait for him to stop doing the thing. It's really funny. And basically I was shown that there is, the thing that surprised me the most was that I saw Jesus Christ. I saw that Jesus,
Wow.
with everything we kind of believe about him, is true. Now, this is the part
Did
where I have to.
you grow up Christian?
No, not even. No, that's the weirdest part. Jesus is not even in my hard drive. Like it's not. I don't even exist in relationship to him in any way. Like I don't have a anti-Jesus thing. You know, some people grow up Catholic and then they get scarred, and then they're like, I don't want anything to do with it. But then they're still in relationship to it, just in a negative one, right? And for me, that was not the case. So the fact that I was shown that, to me, the thing that makes a lot more sense is more of the Eastern tradition, or a little bit more of kind of like secular. So in the sense that to me, the thing that makes the most sense to me is the fact that there's just some kind of a unified field of energy. We're all a part of it. If we let go of attachments, just like what the Buddha taught, you would kind of be released from the constraints of the karmic cycle. That's the thing that made the most sense to me.
That's what you personally naturally relate to.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a long time meditator. I know that these things really work. I've done quite a few Vipassana retreats. I know that this thing really works. Like you can really bring yourself to a different state. So when I was shown that, it actually felt very arbitrary to me. I was
when
like,
you were shown that, what does that mean? Like what you were
visually, I just saw Jesus ascending towards this like some kind of a unified field, which was shown to me to be kind of like what we believe to be the biblical God. I was also shown, which is, this part Christians really love. They don't love the next part, which is that they show me that there's more than that. So there's like, it goes beyond that. And then and all of this is okay. So now you will understand why, to some degree, I find these accounts, even though I don't mind talking about them, I really have to be mindful of how it impacts people and what it leaves them with. So like if it leaves them with a disturbance, I did them a disservice. So that's not my attempt. And I've experienced this a few times now. I have a friend who recently came to Christ out of nowhere, like at his 40s. And I can see the difference in him. Like he's different. Like he a lot of the kind of the angst and the thing kind of went away. And we were talking, and I kind of told him this whole thing, and then he was obviously super stoked about hearing about Jesus. And then I told him there's this other thing, which all of it I find arbitrary, both, and I don't mean to offend, but like Jesus and the fact that they show me that there's things beyond it, and at the top there's a woman, not a unified field, not some kind of a woman. Very clearly, they're like, it's a female, like 100%. And I was like, what? Like it's just so, why what, this doesn't make any sense. Like why would why would there be a sex at all? Like
It
this
is,
is
there are interesting interpretations of the story of Eden,
hmm,
which where Eve is the hero, and
hmm,
what the story goes that history is written by the victors, and there are these inversions that have happened. And look, I mean, there are stories like the Gnostic texts and
yeah.
the Book of Enoch and other things. I studied philosophy and religion in college for folks that don't, so I find this stuff just interesting.
So the
And
snake was basically the real angel that came from the real,
there,
and it
there's
was
a
trying to wake us up. Yeah.
there's a telling of the story, yes, where the snake was actually a bringer of truth, like eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil is a form of awakening and enlightenment, and then leaving the garden is actually entering responsibility for oneself rather than bathing as babes in undifferentiated existence, right?
Yeah. No,
There's some
exactly. But to me, what stood out is that when I mentioned that to that friend of mine, I saw his face drop, and he was just like, like, no, what do you mean? Like that's no,
So
like
let me probe a little bit more here. So look, we're bipedal, we're Homo sapiens, we got certain features and properties. This is one planet across who knows how many planets. My view is there's probably life on other planets, statistically speaking. There's enough planets with water out there and conditions for life, and probably a matter of time before we start to see evidence of carbon and other kinds of things. Maybe there's like a what did Isaac Asimov call something you put around a sun that captures energy?
Dyson spheres.
Dyson sphere, right? Maybe we'll see like a glimmer of a Dyson sphere or something. Who knows what? But so when you said like there are spirits above and so forth, what do they have human-like properties, or is it a feminine quality?
Well, they showed me her as a,
literally
yeah,
like female
they
human. Yeah.
yeah, they showed me her as a human, obviously, but I think it was just to illustrate properties. I obviously don't think she's there's no way she's a human, right? um I was also shown that they're very different things. So it's almost like it, it definitely flies in the face of some modern spirituality ideas. So like, it is not some continuum along which we are. It's not like we're going to become that one day. It's a completely different thing. We are not gods. We are not. That's what was shown to me. Like, we're not. We can be a lot more by living in accordance to certain rules, just like everything I said. But we will never become that. It's a different species of things. And it was interesting because it's almost like I felt like I went backwards in my understanding, because I would imagine that everything I'm saying right now would be some kind of just a human story that we made up to feel comfortable, right? So why would this be shown to me under the banner, that's how things are? It just doesn't make any sense. And the only way I can make sense of it, by still kind of falling back on my more secular perception, is that we run a certain kind of software that helps us to be better at whatever is required to become more as a species. And maybe these ideas are the best ones to kind of guide us through it. Because obviously, I don't think she's a woman, right? I don't even. Again, I still don't know why it should be a she, but if it is, it is. Like, I mean, I guess it's as arbitrary as anything. Like, why anything in the beginning? Like, that's kind of like the ultimate question, right? Um, and this is why when I so just to be frank, as I'm experiencing these things, the way I see my role is that I'm just reporting honestly, and I'm trying to stay as close as possible to what I saw. And when I'm offering my interpretation, I'm trying to be honest about, like, okay, that's my interpretation now. and I'm constantly modifying by being sensitive to how it impacts others. And that experience with my friend was informative for me, because it was like, well, it's not necessarily for everybody to know this all the time. It's like, if he's happy, that's where it needs to be. That this is it, and whatever was shown to you beyond that point might be just for you or for other people that want to hear it. But I don't have a punchline here, so I am more careful. Like with the stuff that I told you before, I can see the direct connection between how people can live their life
Right,
better
right.
by saying that there's some enormous god woman who's like above everything. I don't know how this informs our lives. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the
Wait,
fact that
what was like that? Was that a perception or was there an interaction? Like,
it was actually very clear. She was just, again, I'm always at this point, because my impression is that these things are real. I'm super careful with how I speak,
yeah.
but that's just what I saw. She was just like this super hot babe, like just that was it. Like, it's just like, I was like, okay. It's like, so is it? And maybe there was something about that was significant, in that what we perceive as beauty and all and attraction and all that stuff, are they universal qualities that she's kind of the epitome of, right? So like, maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Do love, truth, and beauty cohere in your conception? They do.
Some yes, but I don't really know. This is all my guesswork now, right? What I did see, however, is that very clearly that it wasn't like they were saying the thing that you believe Jesus to be. So like some kind of a thing like that. They were saying Jesus Christ, exactly how he appears in the Bible, because they made sure that I see the details and like exactly how he appears. So to me, that was a clear indicator of not kind of like, but that exactly. So like the whole thing that Jesus kind of holds our karma and kind of died for our sins and all of that stuff. So because we can't do that yet as a species. But what I think I saw, I'm a little bit more careful with that part, because I'm convinced that that's what I saw, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's what I took from it, is that what happens now is that Jesus basically ascends in such a way that he kind of finishes his contract. So then we get to take back our karma. So like we collectively, we become responsible. Not individually yet, because we can't do that yet, but like we become collectively responsible, versus the God Almighty kind of holding our karma and because he already paid the price. Yeah.
But you weren't that okay. Interesting. One more thing.
So it's almost like a new era, which is interesting because it is entering into a new, I guess, zodiac cycle, right? Of Aquarius, which is more about sovereignty, kind of like these higher kind of like ideas and functions. So it's less about Christ consciousness executing for us. It's more like sovereignty. We become the driving force because we're graduating. That was kind of that's what it felt like they was saying, basically.
Got it. Interesting. Look, I'm sure you've heard of other things out there like NDEs, near-death experiences, and people's reports of that. Does that correspond at all to anything you've seen? Is there any connection between these two states of mind?
So yeah, I think so. I personally never experienced it, but I know I have a really good friend who I trust implicitly because he's just a very down-to-earth guy. And he had an open heart surgery, and he had the full thing. He's like, and he wasn't religious at all. He was like, oh, he had no. When he came out of it, he told me, I have no doubt whatsoever that this is real. Like the whole story. He was hovering above his body, went to visit his mom in Ireland, like saw her, not like in a dream. He said, like, I saw her like in real life. She couldn't see me, but I could see her, and then I could just kind of project myself into all kinds of places. And after that, he was convinced that this thing is real. I do think that the model that makes sense to me is some form of reincarnation, and there's actually some data in that regard, actually. And so I think that we may be going through iterative processes here to learn something, and then when we're ready, we get to proceed to the next level. I recently my daughter was born, and we did a home birth, so I've experienced kind of like the real thing. Thank you. and her name is actually Eden. So,
Oh wow.
and yeah,
Huh. That's a
and
synchronicity, isn't that?
the what?
That's a synchronicity right there.
Not
Small
a
little.
single. She picked it. I know she picked it. Hi, baby girl. She's looking at me. Yes, I know. I love you. Uh, and then when I
Mhm.
saw her come in, I was like, oh, this is a portal. Like, for sure. She's coming from somewhere else. Like, there's no way, two ways about it. And it's a messy process. It's a difficult process. There's pain
Hmm.
involved. There's, it's serious. When you're moving between the worlds, it's serious.
Hmm.
And that, I think, is to some degree, that's what we're in the process of. We started moving through the birth canal. And as Terence used to point out, if you walk in on a birth and you don't know what that is, it looks like an emergency.
Well, yeah, Dr.
Uh,
Stanislav Grof writes a lot about this. He's the professor at Berkeley I mentioned who did a lot of studies with like trauma and psychedelics. I don't fully understand it all. I'm just trying to make a connection
yeah,
to
yeah,
people
yeah.
who related.
What specifically, if you don't mind me?
Yeah, he makes the case that people have trauma through birth, and
Mm,
that trauma makes itself felt in different ways, and
mm.
people need to address that. And so,
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, like, I mean it not metaphorically. Like, I think that we go through levels, and wherever babies come from, not the physical part of the baby, but the whatever is not the physical part. I think it moves through different levels, and then maybe some of it comes through reincarnation on the same level. So it's almost
mhm.
iterations. But then when you're ready, you proceed to the next level, and then so it's almost like iterations. And then you that whatever that signature is kind of proceeding to the next level where you
Is
get to learn more.
video game a good metaphor at all, or
Very good metaphor, yeah. I would say that it's almost a perfect metaphor because it's
how do you win the
computationally
game?
rendered.
What's the prize? Like, how do you get the service to others? Seems to be a common theme. Number one, right?
It's not about the
Growth.
prize. Yeah,
Okay.
it's about the prize is the experience. You get to have a more beautiful experience every single moment if you just focus on the right things. I like Tony Robbins was a lot in the habit of always saying there's only so much you can feel by yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that's absolutely true. The more you it runs through and through, right? And then ultimately I think that in a video game like RPG video games, even on this level, like role playing games, like Final Fantasy or something, you play within a city or like a more limited space. You do a bunch of missions, you do all kinds of things. When you complete the missions, you get to go and play on the world map. Well, look at all this real estate out there
Hmm.
in space. This seems to be pretty
Hmm.
big world map.
Hmm.
Well, we need to complete some levels before we go and play in that world map. So I would say the game metaphor is a pretty perfect one.
Interesting. Have you seen reports of these UAPs and unexplained phenomena? This is becoming a big comeback. Tucker Carlson. Oh, I don't really listen to Tucker Carlson and disclosure. So I've just got a lot of things going on. But now and then you see a clip, and he makes this claim that, hey, look, maybe angels and demons of millennia ago are this phenomena that we're seeing out there today. Does any of that make sense or relate or resonate, or what are your reactions to
Yeah,
that?
the first thing to point out is that that's not a point that Tucker Carlson makes. That's a very old point.
Okay.
I personally have never seen the connection in these hyperspaces. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. In fact, I've had some people who I trust their opinion told me that they saw that
Mhm.
absolutely, like for example, what was happening in New Jersey was like the real deal, and I
Yeah,
was
I
very
live in New
surprised.
Jersey. I saw unusual phenomena. So
So okay, well
look at
let me
that.
ask you this, because I was very surprised. I said, "Really?" I have one of my listeners who lives there too, and she showed me some of the stuff, and I'm like, "That's just a light that somebody projects. It's like a Batman signal that somebody does."
Yeah,
Like,
it's a handful of instances, but still, it's enough. And it's like, what?
interesting.
You just can't
Didn't
explain
wasn't
how to
that the,
explain.
wasn't this the one event? And it doesn't mean it's what it is, yeah. But it's the one event that the Trump administration did take responsibility for. No, didn't they say it was drones that they were? I remember seeing
No,
the White House spokesperson.
said he would have a disclosure. He said they're flying above Bedminster, where he is, and there was no disclosure. Now there are there are congressional inquiries, and there's a dedicated panel around this, and there's actually a part of the executive branch that is focused on this, but seems woefully incompetent and not really focused on it at all. And then you have Senator Harry Reid, who passed away, who is actually leading the charge on a lot of this stuff. And then you've got people like David Grush, who's a former intelligence individual from Johns Hopkins, very thoughtful, articulate. He was on Joe Rogan's show. And you listen to what he says. He's like, look, I could tell you exactly where to go at an address level, but I'm not permitted to because of security clearances, but behind closed doors or at a skiff, he's willing to share things. Like, there are credible people out there. I mean, that content is out there. You have to look for it, though. It's not the media's from
no. I'm familiar with the content. I'll just be honest with you. So my take, it's really funny because considering the claims I'm making,
I know, right?
It
makes me look mainstream, right?
No. It's not what I meant at all. Mid sentence I realized that this might appear what I'm saying. It's not what I meant at all. What I meant to say is, considering the fact the claim that I'm making, people are always surprised to learn how conservative I am about all of these other claims, because I can only interact with what I know with a certain amount of certainty from my own personal experience. And even though I've seen UAPs myself before, so I know they're real. Whatever they are, they're real. Like that, let me just make it clear. I've seen them. I know they're real. Mm-hmm. There's the secondary question of who knows what about it. That's a secondary question.
Right.
My impression, which is informed by nothing but my intuition, so I want to be very clear, is that what's going on here is that 99% of all the people that are talking about this don't have the first clue about any of it. What is happening to my mind is that, and this is not a new idea, it's out there. I think it is some form of keeping a finger on making the public believe that there's some handle on it by producing all of these very theatrical congressional hearings, and I call it around the cornerism. It's like, it's around the corner, it's coming, it's around the corner. And while it's around the corner, you can sell books, you can sell movies, you can do a lot of things while it's around the corner.
Those are coming. There's a movie
if it arrives,
summer.
You can never sell these films anymore. So that's what I think is happening. I think there's genuine confusion by the government. They don't actually know what's going on. And then, because it's just that my personal interaction with them, they're so alien that it makes sense that they're aliens. Like when you interact with them for real, you go, whoa, like it's like some kind of a thought vector that you couldn't even imagine existed, right? These things, or what people describe to me, sound like a humanly made idea of what an alien is. Like it's not what a real alien would be, right?
I don't think many people.
Sorry?
I think it's genuinely unexplained phenomena. That's what it is.
Well, but do people assume that they're kind of like aliens from another planet or something like that, right? It's not even implied. It's kind of said. So again, I want to repeat, it is just my take. I'm not claiming to know that's the case. I'm just watching these people, including Rush, by the way. And I'm like, I'm no Chase Hughes, but like I'm watching it and I'm like, I'm not convinced by any of this. It sounds more to me like somebody's saying something because somebody gave him a script. That what it appears more to me.
We'll see. Grush reports that certain information was leaked about him, including health records and others, to try to discredit him.
It's not. Yeah. I'm not relying on those. I'm watching the person talk.
I see.
The one person that I can tell you that I think is absolutely genuine, and I'm sure there's quite a few of them, is Commander Fravor. That is a very genuine report to me. Like that as real as it's gonna be. I think he genuinely saw what he saw. I don't think he's confused. I think he interact with the real thing. I do also. There's something very honest about him. Now, I can be misreading the people. I can be completely wrong about all of this. Absolutely. I did ask, I didn't just rely on my opinion. I did ask a couple of people that I know that's their job to like read people on that level. One of them is a professional interrogator, and they both told me the same thing. It was like, yeah, that's a script. I was like, okay, but can we all be wrong about this? Yes. I'm just giving you my take. I think that, and I do always like to go back to this, like, how does this relate? So when it's around the corner, it's entertainment and it's fascinating. I don't know how many people spend time thinking what they would do if an actual disclosure happens. So like if disclosure happens today, you wake up tomorrow, okay, what now what? Like what is the thing that is different for you? Like you're still going to work? What is, because I think that I think, again, I want to emphasize, I'm not claiming to have like some deep insight into other people's minds, but my assessment of the situation is that there's something about this. It's like an object that is used, and the reason that people connect to it so strongly is because it signifies, if the disclosure happens, it signifies a moment of complete pivot. Like it's a oh, finally, like people are trying to be released from the constraints of their daily lives, right?
Right.
So I feel like that's what it is. It's like almost like escapism. Like people just want to, the reason that I keep going back to the Buddhist perspective is because most of your life is happening right here, right now, and it's all the mundane things. If you can fall in love with the mundane, it's the thing that will actually make you fulfilled over time. You're going to have some events that are really big and interesting and fascinating in your lives, but they're very, yeah, I've seen the trailer for this one.
Trailer.
And
Looking forward to this. Looks entertaining.
yeah, Spielberg. I mean, Spielberg is Spielberg. Like I haven't seen stuff from him in a while, so that's gonna be fun either way. I also heard that what is the other one? The documentary that just came out, The Age of Disclosure. It's called. I heard it's pretty
Yeah,
good.
I haven't seen it, but I think it's on Netflix. Is that right? But
I heard from people it's great. And again, this is what I'm saying. People are always surprised to hear from me such a more like let's tone it down attitude, because ultimately, if it happens tomorrow, it's not like I'm going to be surprised. I'll be like, oh, okay, well, there you go. But at least it's happening. But I do want to kind of make people be a little bit more aware. Like, what do you think what is going to be the impact on you? Is it going to be destabilizing? So, again, a point that Terrence used to make, which is like people spend a lot of time in their lives searching, and they spend almost no time considering what they would do if they ever find it. Like if you truly find the object, okay, now what? Like the journey is over. Now you have to find a new journey, and it just becomes this next iteration of like, oh, let's look for the next thing, and it never ends. So maybe the disclosure is really happening. Again, I've heard from a credible is the wrong word, but somebody who I trust their intellectual prowess tremendously, like a really like very intelligent person. That obviously not going to mention their name. I don't think they want to be known in that capacity. But he said that, yeah, he was shown that the New Jersey thing is the real deal. And I was like, really? He's like, I don't know if it's true, but that's what I was shown. I was like, so I'm very open to being completely wrong about all of this, but I can't shake off this intuition that when I'm watching these people talk, 99% of them, I'm like, I'm just, there's, okay, here's what it is. One time, Joe Rogan told, I think it was when he had Kai Dickens, the woman that did the telepathy tapes.
Mhm.
He had her on, which I think everybody should go and listen to that. It's fascinating that this whole thing is happening, and if it's real, that will also absolutely change all of our paradigm. But he was telling her, he was looking at her, and he goes, it's interesting. Like I'm hearing you. Joe is telling her, I'm hearing you, but there's something I just can't. It keeps this other voice in the back of my mind. It keeps saying, yeah, but really, like it's just. He told her this, and then he told her a story, and I was like, that's what it is. So the story goes, he says, I had a friend that had this insane story. Again, Joe telling her, it has this insane story that happened to him. He was camping, and a bear ran through their camp, and he ran through the tent, and he ended up on the back of the grizzly bear, and the bear is hurling down the hill with like with him on his back, and his friends are like, and if I remember correctly, he said also like people filmed it, and he said when my friend was telling me this story, he said this is like he said that the level of terror, like the amount of emotional impact that he had from it's just when he was telling me the story, aside from the fact that I know who they are and they're not like wouldn't lie about it, and also other people corroborated the story. Aside from that, there was something about the way that person was telling me the story. Their body was there. There's a thing like I know it happened to him because his body is telling me the story. There's an impact that stayed with him from this insane experience. It's the most scared he has ever been in his entire life. He says, whenever people tell me some of these things like UFO, like the disclosure, that's missing.
That's a great point. Right.
Yeah, their body wasn't there. It's like there's
Yeah.
something. It's almost like a fabricated thing. There's something about
Yeah.
it. There's missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where
Fascinating.
I sit with it, basically.
So, well, we can start kind of bringing things to a close here. Why
Sure.
don't you tell us more about how people can follow you, your documentary? You've got a Substack also.
There's one article there now, and I'm posting another one this week. It's just Danny Goler, which is also my Instagram and TikTok
Danny
handle.
Goler, Substack. Okay.
Yeah, just DANNYGOLER. I have a YouTube channel called Dango Thoughts, DANGO Thoughts.
You've got about
It's 3 words.
50,000 followers there, so
Yeah,
people stay pretty
not that
interesting.
much.
So,
Yeah, we're growing, slowly growing, and we created this tool called veilbreak.ai. So just veilbreak.ai, and that's a tool which is basically like a repository of all the laser experiments. So you can go and see other people's reports, and you can leave your own if you're doing it. You can do this anonymously as well. And slowly we're going to have more and more information there that kind of being analyzed in the background, so we can derive some data from it. I started we were finalizing the film, the Discovery, which I'm very excited about. It's the new trailer is going to be dropping soon, and hopefully we're working on distribution now, so hopefully it will be released somewhere around April or June. We are still raising some kind of like last capital, like finalized last thing, so people can always go to GoFundMe. I don't know if people can see the link, but they can donate to the GoFundMe if they want to donate to the efforts. The post-production process is very lengthy and very costly, but the movie truly is. Aaron Vanden, the director, is just I can't say this enough. He is such an absolute force of nature in terms of the artistic expression. It's just unbelievable. He created a masterpiece. And also a producer, Chris Paris, who also is an editor on the film. There you go. And what else? And I started a nonprofit called Code of Reality. This is kind of the official investigative arm, and we are officially raising funds now to actually make sure that we're in a place. We're going to be doing something in Colorado. My business partner David Carter, is already moving to Colorado now to start looking from places. So if anybody is interested in talking to us about being a donor for this project, it's this. I really believe we will be changing some fundamental understanding about the world. This is my older website of Code of Reality. We're going to be revamping it. So those are the main outlets that I would point people to.
Terrific. Any concluding thoughts? Anything you wanted to share before we wrap up? Covered a lot of ground.
The what?
We covered a lot of ground.
We covered a lot of ground. Truly, it sounds so cheesy and chewed up and overused, but really, the more I go into these insane spaces, the imperative of being able to truly be present and just really enjoying this, I highly recommend to anyone to at least pick up or try and pick up some either meditative practice or contemplative practice beyond just kind of the thinking part. Like, if anybody can sign up for a Vipassana retreat, you should. They're free. They're everywhere. And it will blow your mind what you're capable of in just 10 days. It will change your life. And this is just one example of many of what each person can do if they just pick up a little bit of a practice or daily practice where they can pay attention to their moment-to-moment experience, because that's where most things are. The more I expand into this infinite possibility space of insane potential, if we're not grounded, if we're not capable of actually also holding a beautiful present moment together without all these crazy extravagant ideas, my take it is that we won't make it. Like, we won't make it. As I know it sounds like a downer, but like we can't. Like, we have to bring it right here. So my final thoughts would be, please, if you can, aside from being an amazing entrepreneur, business person, somebody who built enormous and impressive things, put more emphasis to the extent that you can on what is it like to be you moment to moment, which also largely determines how people feel around you, which will eventually determine how humanity goes. So that would be my final thought.
That's a great concluding message. Thank you, Danny. Really appreciate that. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a good one.